Yo.
What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you for tuning in. Exciting show today. David Yoshitomo from Yoshitomo in Omaha, Nebraska is on the show. David, thanks for taking some time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Give us a little bit of background of understanding exactly what Yoshitomo is, where exactly in Omaha it is, just a little bit about the restaurant itself.
So Yoshitomo is located in Benson, which is kind of the bohemian strip in the middle of suburbia. So
Yep.
we're kind of the artists and the funky people live here. But we're a little sushi bar on the strip. You know, the restaurant itself, its reason for existence is basically can be summed up like, 99% of sushi bars are pretty much the same. They kind of fall into a diner category or a fancy sushi version of like Red Lobster. And so, that's to me not really very interesting,
That's
but
not
that's
what you
everyone's
wanted it to be.
experience. Right. So our goal is to be like beyond those things, the next step up for a sushi restaurant. Sort of like we've taken the training wheels off, and then now it's time to sort of educate yourself. And so that's the whole idea of the restaurant, sort of a bridge between what you know about sushi and seafood, and then sort of that kind of one step into the door of fine dining.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We're going to get back to this because I'm fascinated exactly what you just said. How something so culturally relevant, something that's so dynamic in its roots in Japan and then a lot in California. A lot of the sushi we know was actually developed in California. And so I'm fascinated in that because somehow, like we always do, we've McDonaldized so much cuisine. That's not a real term, but I'm going to make it a real term.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, to your point, like the strip mall, like in a box sushi restaurant has become like very ubiquitous. So we're going to get into the dynamic of that because I can tell you're passionate about it. But take us back first. Let's go back to David Yoshitomo early on in Omaha, Nebraska. Kind of where did that start for you, especially talking about like hospitality? How did you and when did you catch the industry bug?
Like every young person, you're just sort of bouncing around from job to job, retail. The goal, the plan was just to win the lottery and then not really have to work. But I never really knew what I wanted to do. I had a couple of, cooking jobs and hospitality jobs, Burger King. I was a dishwasher, at a like a greasy spoon that served liver and onions.
Oh, wow.
And everyone brought their own oxygen, when they came in.
All right, I got to know, did you ever work anywhere that served the iconic cult classic of runza?
I actually have made runzas a few times for dinners here, but I haven't worked at a place that had the runzas.
All right. I don't want to take a lot of time on it, but give us like the 47-second tell people what it is because it's something you only see in Nebraska.
It's basically like a small loaf of bread, but inside it's been stuffed with basically hamburger and cabbage, a bunch of salt and pepper. That's the quick and dirty of it.
Yep.
It's that's it.
It feels very Eastern European, some kind of pierogi-esque, but it's more like bread, not really a dumpling.
It's called a beer rock, or I may be mispronouncing, but its origin is the beer rock.
All right, look it up, people. I just wanted to make sure as we had David on, we could get a little from the horse's mouth about runza because there's so much iconic food in the Midwest that like a lot of people don't know about it. So runza, look it up, people. All right. So you're working these kind of one-off jobs. You're just working at the Greasy Spoon. You're kind of moving around.
Yeah.
When did it crystallize for you? Say, wait a minute, there might be something here.
So I was working a retail job, and a friend, he said that the sushi bar he was working at, they were hiring. I put in an application. A server threw it in the garbage. Because I tipped very badly.
Oops.
But the chef pulled it. Yeah, he pulled it out of the garbage and he hired me. And even then, I it was just like, this is what I'm going to do until like I finish college and go do something else. And it wasn't until a couple of years later I took my first kind of solo trip to Japan. I had my concierge at my hotel make me a reservation at a restaurant that I Googled. I just Googled best sushi in Tokyo.
Wow.
And it was Jiro's joint. And I had a concierge make me a reservation. And the next day I showed up for a meal, and it just completely like blew my mind.
Wait, hold on. We gotta hover on that for a second. So you're in Omaha, Nebraska, and this is no offense to Omaha, Nebraska, but some years back, to think of like a sushi restaurant in Omaha, Nebraska is not the first thing that you think. I'll just say that.
Right.
That's the first place that you get a job. You instantly find something that now clearly is your path. You say, I'm going to Japan. You go to the most iconic sushi restaurant in the world on a Google whim, and the concierge getting you a seat at the 9-seat, 10-seat
Yeah,
bar.
it's like 9 or 10 seats. And this was before like the documentary and all that. So like it was a little bit easier to get seats.
And he hadn't gotten 3 Michelin
then.
star, I'm guessing, at that point yet either.
He did. He did. Okay. He had just gotten those stars. And so I had a meal there. I didn't know that food could be that way. I just thought that everyone just messed around in kitchens and played pranks and punched people in the balls, and just like just screwed around until you went and got a different kitchen job. And I didn't know that there were professionals. I didn't know that you could be a sushi chef like as a job, like someone wanted to do that. And so, I remember just kind of sitting against the nondescript building that it's kind of in the basement of, and just kind of like trying to remember it all, and just desperately wanting to be like that, and just not sure how to get there. And so I came home and just sort of decided that like, okay, I'm going to be a cook. I'm going to be a professional. It is Bourdain Day. I was reading, Kitchen Confidential, and it just kind of all those things hit at the same time. And I was like, I'm going to be a cook. Like that's what I'm going to do now. And so, once, I had sort of decided that was what I was going to do, there was a focus, and there was no longer anything to distract me. Like I need to finish school, or I need to, go make some more money doing these other things. Like I need to focus on this thing and get really good at it.
I mean, and your bar was set all the way to 11. Like there is no higher standard. When the person making the rice has been making rice for 6 years, it's a completely different dynamic than us pranksters putting liquid smoke in somebody's Coke.
Right.
That's our culture. So I'm fascinated in that. So you get back to Omaha. How do you then apply what you saw and just barely touched, and recognize instantly that it was at a different level? How do you then apply that going back to Omaha, or I mean anywhere in the country for sure, but Omaha, mid-market, Midwest town? So
what's funny is I wanted to work in Japan. I wanted to stage, so I actually had my mom write me this letter, and I handed it off to Jiro and his son, and I'm not really sure what it said. My mom wrote it. She's like really old. She wrote it in pencil, all sealed up. And a couple of months later, when I got home, I had gotten an email from them offering me a position.
Wow.
We kind of went back and forth. I wanted to stage for like a month. They said I would have to devote 10 years of my life to the restaurant. Okay. And it just wasn't realistic. But after that, it was sort of like, how do I get to there without that particular path? You just sort of stumble around. I ended up becoming the corporate chef for the chain of sushi restaurants that I worked at, and that gave me sort of the carte blanche to like order product, create relationships with vendors and fishermen, and sort of bring things in and teach myself. And so while I was helping them build their program, I was also developing my own skills in my own program, kind of at the same time. So while I was while they were growing, I was growing as well. Though at a certain point, those things didn't really meet. The clientele at the restaurant didn't really want, just really kind of esoteric artisan,
Sure. Your skill started
fishes.
to far exceed what the output of that
Sure,
restaurant expectation
sure,
was. It makes sense.
sure. And so, I just kind of hit a point where it was like kind of clear that I was going to have to find my own way. And I had started to do some of these omakase dinners on my
Yeah,
own
tell people
time.
what omakase is specifically, because I
So,
think it's
yeah.
fascinating and
So
important.
omakase is, essentially it's a tasting meal, a prefix meal. Um, it's usually a set course. You don't get to choose. You just sit down.
Yep.
It can be any different kind of cuisine. But I guess the most popular by far is going to be sushi. And so, in a sushi omakase, you usually get anywhere from 15 to 40 individual pieces of sushi. They're all different. But they're always going to be on sort of the highest level,
Right.
of that particular cuisine.
And so you mostly focus on sushi. Do you ever implement kind of kaiseki style within omakase?
Yeah, so what I really love about it is, it's up to me what I want to do. So usually the first 3 or 4 dishes of my omakase is usually some sort of small otsumami, things that I'm working on for the restaurant, little plated dishes that I can sort of test on these guests and dial them in before I roll them out to the restaurant. And so there'll be a little bit of that at the beginning. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of cooking in there as well, some kaiseki elements for sure.
I like that. So let's go. Let's jump forward to starting the restaurant 3 years ago. You start the restaurant. What was the catalyst for that happening? Talk about those early days, and then we're going to get into some humans. I want to hear about some of the people who helped you open the restaurant, some of the sous chefs, some of the servers who, you said never throw a application in the garbage, because my whole career was started by
It started in
somebody
the garbage.
pulling an application out of the garbage. So let's talk about that a little bit, but take us back to the restaurant. You opened the restaurant 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So maybe about 2 years before I opened up the restaurant, I started doing these omakase dinners. They started out basically seasonally. I would sort of steal space.
Pop-up dinners?
Pop-ups.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah. And so I remember trying to tell people what pop-up dinners were, and they had
no idea. No, he froze. Sophie, can you hear him?
I cannot hear him. He's back.
Yeah, I'm still here.
You froze for a second. Keep going. You're good.
No worries. So they started out seasonally, and then I kind of got to the point where that's all I wanted to do. Like, it's all I could think about, and it's just really hard to do your actual job when you want to be doing something else. And so me and the company I was working with, we parted ways. Then the decision was, do I open my own thing? Do I chase my dream, or do I go work for somebody else and help them build theirs? And it became pretty clear that I just needed to go do my thing. And so I had no money. One of my friends, I play in a couple of bands, and one of my guitar players owns a bar. He was willing to put up for like a small $90,000 loan. I took out 5 credit cards, found an old Subway that had just been abandoned here on the Strip, and like 3 months later, like it was a restaurant. And so,
wow, you put it all on the line. I mean, I'm getting anxiety right now just hearing you speak about this, because what you're talking about right now plays out the other way 99% of the time. So you fought your way through.
It was a bootstrap operation in the most extreme sense. A little pro tip for anyone wanting to open up a restaurant on credit cards: you have to apply for all of the credit cards in the same month, because it takes a month for them to hit your credit report. So they don't know that that all 5 companies didn't know that I had 4 other cards that had just arrived.
That's the pro tip hack to not tanking your credit like that.
Yeah. So we opened up the restaurant. It did pretty well. it was kind of sort of a secret for a while. After a couple of months, we started rolling out omakase. I started traveling again. So I also travel and do omakase in other cities with other chefs.
Yep, I've seen that.
And so it just started to it was just a buzz started to build. The community started to figure it out. Guests that came in to try us realized that something different and exciting was going on. And, it just sort of kind of went from there. It just kind of took on a life of its own.
Who's your buddy that gave you the loan? He's like a superhero.
It's my buddy Rob Reuter. He's just like an old 65-year-old man trapped in a 40-something body. He's just the town's silver fox. He's a great dude.
I literally know who you're talking about. I already know. Yeah,
just like a silver streak in his hair. Yep. He's a beautiful man.
Honestly, this is so funny. We talk about unsung hospitality heroes. We're always trying to learn about and be introduced to new people. And a lot of times that's challenging. We forget about the people in the trenches. Yet there's two groups that I try to highlight whenever possible. One are like guests. Mm-hmm. There's so many guests, regulars we call them just colloquially, but like they make this possible. Somebody willing to invest $90,000 in you is like a bedrock of this industry. And so I want to make sure that we know, Rob, you are a hero, my friend. I appreciate
for sure.
You.
And he maybe it was ignorance or whatever, but if somebody asked me to put down $100,000 in a restaurant, I'm probably not doing it because that's a bad investment.
It's not smart money. No,
not at all. But he did it. He trusted me, and we haven't lost any money, not very much. But we're doing all right.
Like any restaurant, you want to make a small fortune, you start with a large fortune. What's interesting, I think, when I hear you speaking, that I think is important is Rob didn't invest in the restaurant because that's fucking stupid money. It just is. Right. Like the math it doesn't make sense. He invested in David Yoshitomo. That is a smart investment. And there's a difference. And I think when you come from a place where you're building a brand around the human capital that you're deploying versus it's a restaurant in this location, it does this, that, and the other, that economics is really challenging. But David Yoshitomo is a smart investment. So I want people to think about that for sure. It's clear.
Yeah, and when you run across other, cooks and chefs and everybody, they kind of want to own their own restaurant. But, if you've bounced from job to job every 3 months, 6 months, it doesn't matter if you worked at the French, laundry and single thread for 3 months at a time. Like if somebody's going to give you money, they want to know that like they can trust you with it. Like I spent 12 years at the job that I had before I opened my restaurant, that I'm not just going to like disappear one day, so it's important that like, if owning a restaurant and asking people for money is something that you think you're going to have to do in the future, like being a person that people can count on is, I think, the most important thing. It's those personal relationships where he knew that I wasn't going to let him down. It was my life, my family's life on the line. Like I couldn't just jet when the new shiny thing just showed up.
Makes sense. All right. I'm very fascinated again. I want to talk about some of your people. So you go to Jiro, you see that, you come back and you just hack your way through teaching yourself. Mm-hmm. You're working for this company that's got the resources to bring in, maguro from Tsujiki, like fish market, Tsukiji fish market, and you like hack it that way. Now you've created a place in Omaha where you can be that breeding ground for the future talents within sushi, omakase, kaiseki, any kind of cuisine within the Japanese heritage. Talk about some of the people and the way that you interact as a leader, trying to instill what clearly was in one meal changed your life forever. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So finding a crew is a bit tough. There's always somebody, there's plenty of cooks out there, but finding people who want to make sushi and even want to make sushi as their job, like that's what they want to, someone who's said, I'm going to make sushi for the rest of my life. I'm not going to do anything else. There aren't that many people out there. And so finding the right people here was pretty difficult. One of the first guys that I hired, maybe the first guy that I hired, was this kid that I'd worked with named Matt Kelly. And he had made sushi at the mall. One of the projects that I was involved in was opening sort of this food hall, and there was a sushi concept at the mall. and he worked at the mall, and he had made some sushi at one of the other local restaurants here in town for a couple of years. But he had hit sort of the ceiling. Like he was stuck where everyone else was stuck, where like someone showed you how to make a bunch of sushi rolls and you were a maki boy. But that was it. He didn't know that there was anything beyond that. And so when I brought him in, you know, I wasn't really looking for an apprentice. I didn't expect to find anybody who was like, you know, going to be a sponge for all the things I wanted to do. I thought I was going to have to like cut all the fish myself, do all the preparations, teach people to make sushi rolls, and then just kind of go from there. But he took to it just immediately.
That's great.
You know, he went from, you know, making sushi for 5 years. He didn't know how to cut a fish, had never really made nigiri, you know, properly. You know, it was just kind of a mess. And now 3 years later, he is one of the strongest sushi chefs I've ever met. He can cut almost anything. He knows advanced preparations. We learn these things together. It's just incredible. You know, he went from, you know, basically, you know, the lowest station at the restaurant to maybe one of the strongest sushi chefs I've ever met. You know, not just in the city, but just in my journey, you know, over the last, you know, 15 years. So he helps me run the whole thing now. He's great.
That is what you just said is the most important function of the hospitality industry, I believe. Cultivating humans is like what we're here to do. Like we're here to feed you, yet the feeding is like the extension of the people that are so passionate about whatever that is that they're serving. Otherwise, it's just food on a plate. Like for me, it's not as important what's on the plate, it's who got it to the plate. Like that's really what's important to me. So to take a kid who's the mall sushi chef, which does not evoke a lot of confidence in their skill and ability, and turn them into what you just said is one of the best sushi chefs you've worked with knowing you and the trips to Japan and traveling this country and collaborating with chefs at a super high level. That is praise that I can tell that you don't just kind of say to placate to like somebody who you work with. You really mean it. So now I'm interested. You look at Matt now as somebody now who's within your company. What do you see him doing?
Yeah. You know, he's learning a lot. You know, like now I bounce stuff off of him.
I absolutely love it. So the interaction of omakase is very intimate. It's very different than a lot of meals because they're not pointing at a thing and saying, I want that. They're saying, I trust you. I will submit. We talked about Bourdain, right? He talks about cooking is about control and dining is about submission, right? And, we lost him. I'm just going to tell the audience, Bourdain on Bourdain Day, on his birthday, he talked a lot about that. Dining or cooking is about control and dining was about submission. And so I'm fascinated in that dynamic. Hopefully I can babble for a couple seconds and we'll get him back on. But there we go. He's back. So on Bourdain Day, you know, he talks about, dining being about submission, about putting myself in your hands. And omakase is one of the purest forms because it's totally the ebb and flow of what's in season, of the mood of the chef. So talk about that interaction, the relationship that you're creating in a, 72-minute meal. Oh, did you not hear any of that, David? Can you hear me?
So here at the restaurant, we have a couple of different ways to experience omakase. So in the restaurant, I caught some of the end. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It sounds like we have a delay now. Yeah, talk about omakase, the relationship that it creates. Hopefully you heard that.
I lost you.
Oh, technology. We're just going to stare lovingly into each other's eyes.
So the omakase, we have a couple different ways to experience it. We have a restaurant omakase that we just sort of that we rolled out here a couple of months ago at the bar, and I let Matt and one of my other guys, Jeff, they're starting to explore their own styles in that. So we do dishes from the restaurant, we do specialty fishes that we bring in, and we work on the preparations for those, and then they're free to sort of move beyond that if they want. I don't let everyone do it. It's just pretty much them, and they control that, but they can start to create a community, people that want to dine with them. I think that's what's the most important thing about sushi. It's a one-to-one face-to-face interaction. I don't want to serve somebody on the third floor of a restaurant that I can't see. I want to be able to see the people and gauge from their reaction whether they like what I'm doing or not, and can kind of move from there. And so at the restaurant, we have that experience, and I'm glad that I have guys that are sort of taking to that, learning kind of more advanced preparations and rolling that out and creating their own sort of clientele. There are guests that come into this restaurant that they like come in the door and they want to give my, Matt and Jeff a hug, and they just walk right by me, just blow by me. And I'm like,
yes.
And I'm like, that's great. And then so with that, we also have, I do an omakase usually about 3 nights a week, every other week, where I try to take the experiences that I have in omakase rooms across Japan, and I bring them back. So I go and I have great meals. I find things that I like. I come back and I try to sometimes recreate that dish, exactly. But I take all of those elements and I bring them back. And it's just great to be able to have to create those relationships with people. I have guests that come in now every month, every other month, every 3 months. We're good friends. I'm more excited about catching up and getting excited about this new thing. I see some of my guests on the books. I know things that they absolutely love, and I'll make sure that those are on the menu for the night. And so it's less about making a big pile of cash and more about being part of a community and just having more personal relationships with food, because that's when the food is good, is when you have a personal relate. That's why mom's food is so great. You have a personal connection to that, and so that's really I think the key to like really good omakase, but just good food in general is that secret ingredient of personal relationships.
Absolutely. All right, I want to end with this, David. A dish. Give us one dish that actually is just an opportunity to start a compelling conversation with a guest. Like, what is that one dish that you say, this is like the purest form of Japanese cuisine, and every time I give it to somebody, that's where I start the conversation with them. Is there something like that for you?
Yeah, usually it's my mackerel course, my saba course. What I like to say is like, it's really easy to love tuna and toro. Toro is like the Brad Pitt of sushi. Like
I love toro and Brad Pitt.
Like it's good. Like he's smooth. He it's everybody. He's easy to love. But something like mackerel, it's not. It's
mackerel is like the Steve Buscemi. Yes. Like he's in all those movies. You're like the guy who's kind of like squirrely and weird in the Adam Sandler movies and stuff. That guy.
Yeah.
But if you know Boardwalk Empire, you love that.
Right.
I'm with you.
Right. So the more, it's complex. The flavors aren't easy. And it's also an item that requires more skill out of the chef, to get it to really taste good. And also it's a great expression of the chef's philosophy. Like you can go a lot of different directions with it. It can be more salty. It could be more, more pickled. It can be sweeter. It can be, really subdued. And it's sort of one of those things that usually people try at other restaurants, and it's just either cheap or not done well, or it's frozen and they don't like it. And it's the real opportunity to be like, okay, here's something I know you probably don't actually like, but if you're going to give it a real chance here, and if you don't like this, then you're free to just not like it forever, So it's definitely mackerel for me. Like, and my particular preparation now, when I kind of landed on what I finally do with it, I ate it, and it was the first time I ate my own food and was like, wow, this like tastes like the things that I'm like going for. Like this, you know, people will be like, oh, you make really great food, but you eat your own food and you're like, it's just food, whatever. I'm just a cook. But it was the first time I ate something and was like, that doesn't taste like I made it. Like it tastes like someone else made it.
That is amazing. So when somebody has that dish, they are transported and you're transported, which I love.
Yes.
I'm so glad that you said that, because I want people to look up Saba, S-A-B-A, look it up, because there's a method of salt and sugar curing that is very nuanced. You have to be very understanding of the size of the fish, the density, the age of the fish. There's a lot of complexity. So I think of that, and I think of, Japanese omelet. Look this up as well. Tamago, T-A-M-A-G-O. Look it up, people. These are the two places that I start. If you can do those well, I trust you. And so I'm glad that you said that. That was really great, because that's personal to me as well. David, amazing conversation. I love what you're doing.
Yeah.
People, Omaha, Nebraska is on fire right now. Do not sleep on it. I joked about it a couple times, but do not sleep on it.
No.
And what Yoshitomo is doing and what David's doing and Matt and was it Jeff, what the team is doing, I think it matters. And the fact that you're empowering your people to the point where the dude whose name's on the door gets bypassed when it's hug time, when they walk in the door, that matters to me. And I think it should matter to us as an industry. So David, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was great to talk.
All right. Appreciate you. Cheers.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. A little bit of technical difficulty, but awesome. Really great conversation. And I so appreciate somebody who's so thoughtful about connecting the dots between culture, food, and humans. That's the whole game. So the fact that David is doing that and doing it at a super high level is important to me. And again, I'm joking about it. Like, having spent time in the Midwest, my formative years were in Ames, Iowa, not necessarily considered the culinary mecca, yet I learned so much and understood ingredients in a very nuanced way. And Omaha, Nebraska, and Kansas City, these cities are really catapulting themselves. I think of Des Moines, Iowa, and having some amazing food ferments from Harbinger there. Like, don't sleep on it. And the more that we build trust and confidence on both sides of that equation, the more opportunity there's for chefs, for restaurants to connect culture and heritage, food, and humans. So, Sophie, what did you think?
I was so excited that he went to Jiro. I was like, oh my God.
I mean, get a table there. Come on.
I mean, I know that, I know about it because of the documentary, and he went before the documentary, but I was just like, oh, I know what you're talking about. Oh my God.
Yeah, I knew about it. I didn't know about it until he got 3 Michelin stars. And so I was interested in that. And a lot of people didn't. It's so funny seeing pictures of the first time he got 3 Michelin stars. It's all these white European chefs and this tiny little Japanese dude, just like, what the hell am I doing here? It was when they launched in Tokyo, and I think it's like 7 places or something in Japan, and now Tokyo has the most per capita. They go back and forth between San Sebastian and Tokyo is the most per capita of Michelin stars of any city in the world. So super cool time. Koi Tran, thank you very much. Great podcast. You're great. Really appreciate you. So what are a couple other takeaways? Brad Pitt, that was hilarious.
That was hilarious. I learned a lot about new foods. I didn't know anything about the Nebraskan sandwich thing. Super interesting. Yeah, I found it. And then also I was really, it was cool to hear him talk about creating a community through the omakase, he doesn't want to, he said, I don't want to serve a guest on the 3rd floor of a restaurant that I can't see, because I want to create this community through the food. And that really made me think of Jiro's restaurant, where there's only 9 or 10 spots, and you just have a personal connection with the chef every time. So
we would have gone down this whole other rabbit hole with that, because Jiro talks about it. I've heard him talk about it multiple times, and I think he mentions it for a second in the documentary. He notices the way people interact when they first walk in. He's always watching them, and if somebody's left-handed
or right-handed
to the other side, right? And if it's a woman or a man or this or that, he's thinking about them and their experience of the food. And if it's one more little cut to break the tension of the fish so it's more tender, things like that, That's the interaction that you can have at that level. That's really hard to duplicate on any other scale. So I really appreciate that. Awesome. I agree with you. Great podcast. Super awesome episode.
Yeah.
Yoshitomo in Omaha, Nebraska.
I gotta get out to Nebraska. I never wanted to go there, but now I gotta go there.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to talk Betsy into going there because we're going to finally get out of the house and road trip. And so look out for this. I'm just going to throw this out there. Look out for this. The week of July 6th through 12th, we're going to be doing episodes from Iowa, where we're going to be with the in-laws. And all of our guests, we're going to focus on the state of Iowa, where my formative years were. We're going to be out there. And I'm pretty sure we're going to drive through Omaha. So we might have to time that out and go see Yoshitomo while we're out there. So appreciate everybody. Great show today. Thank you so much. Cheers.